Hello, welcome to this informational video on professionalism. Job searching and transitioning into a career as an international individual presents its own unique challenges. So the University of Georgia Career Center developed this video to provide you with some tips, resources, and support during this process. After watching this video, if you would like further clarity on certain areas or would just like to sit down with someone in our office, we encourage you to come to the Career Center for help. We are located in Clark Howell Hall, that's right next to the Tate Student Center. You are welcome to attend drop-in hours every weekday from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. for brief questions. But if you would enjoy spending more time with the career consultant specifically designated for your major, I encourage you to call our front desk to schedule an appointment. We do host international student drop-in hours once a month in Memorial Hall as well, and you can keep up with those dates and times on Handshake or on our Career Center website. Know that we offer our UGA graduates free career services for life, so you can access our help even when you are no longer a student. Here are the topics that we will cover in this video. We will start with professional dress. We will move on to workplace relationships before diving into communication styles and strategies. We will then move on to general etiquette in the American workplace before we conclude on how to measure if you are accomplishing your goals and doing well in the new role. Before we begin, I would like to address what professionalism means. And this is difficult to define, as professionalism is a very subjective concept, meaning that every individual will have their own opinion on what is deemed professional and what is not. This video will go into common expectations of appropriate workplace behavior. Your workplace may have different expectations, so it's good to openly communicate with your supervisor to understand the common practices in your environment. I also want to note that this presentation will address common appropriate workplace practices in an American context and culture. This information is not meant to encourage you to change your actions or behaviors, but instead give you an awareness of what the expectation may be for you in your future position. Okay, let's get started with appropriate workplace attire. Professional dress communicates preparedness, awareness of the company's image and reputation, and respect for your colleagues. If you are working in a more formal environment, you may be asked to wear professional dress to work. If you would like to see examples of professional attire, I encourage you to look at the Career Center's Pinterest. You can find this at pinterest.com/UGA Career Center. As you can see here, professional dress is usually neutral in color and most often includes a blazer or jacket. If you are in a slightly more casual environment, the expectation could be business casual attire. As you see here, there's more color in these images. Dress pants and a button-up shirt, a dress or skirt, or sweater will be perfectly appropriate here. Regardless of the formality of the space, your outfit should be clean, free of stains, and free of wrinkles. It should be conservative in length and in fit, meaning not too short or tight on the body. Your hair and accessories should also be non-distracting. Professional dress is an area that will vary depending on your office environment, so it's okay to ask your supervisor what their expectations are for your dress. If you dress in a manner that is specific to your culture or religion, in most instances, you can wear it to work. The U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission states, in most instances, employers are required by federal law to make exception to their usual rules or preferences to permit applicants and employees to observe religious dress and grooming practices. You should speak to your employer if you have any questions regarding their policies around appropriate cultural attire. An aspect of professional dress is also your hygiene. In the American culture, hygiene standards are pretty high, and people can be hyper aware of general cleanliness and scent. Bodily odors can be especially off-putting in a workplace. So in order to combat bodily odor, it is important to bathe regularly, wash your clothes often, usually after one wear deodorant, and potentially carry breath mints or gum. Okay, let's move on to workplace relationships. Workplace relationships can be different than the relationships that you have with your friends in class or in student organizations. Do work colleagues equal friends? Yes and no. This is a decision mutually made between you and your coworker. If you would like to be buddies with your coworker and hang out after work, know that you can. Some people meet their closest friends at work. But keep in mind that a damaged personal relationship with a colleague could affect you professionally. So approach becoming best friends with your coworkers with a slight amount of caution. If you choose not to be friends with your coworkers, that's fine too. You are not required to be friends. But just know you are required to be friendly, meaning kind and respectful towards them. Even in the best office environments, conflict is bound to arise at some point. Handling a conflict with a coworker and manager takes a slightly different approach. With a coworker, first approach them to discuss the issue. Prepare to not get your way, but instead offer a compromise if that is an option. I highly encourage you not to talk about the issue or person when they are not around. This could be considered gossiping. Only approach a manager about the issue if your one-on-one conversation with a coworker was ineffective. With a manager, approach with communication as the main theme. The manager may not be aware of the issue in which you can communicate your concern, or there may be some factors contributing that you are not aware of, and they can take this opportunity to communicate that to you. You can also use this conversation to talk about and adjust your different communication styles so there is not as many issues in the future. It is important not to criticize or show disrespect to your supervisor. If the situation is particularly bad and you feel demeaned or discriminated against by your supervisor or anyone else in the workplace, you may need to contact human resources. One of the predominant ways that people communicate in an office is via email. You should keep in mind that your work email is not your own, but the company's property. Therefore, keep a separate email for any non-work related communication. When using your work email, don't say anything you wouldn't say to someone face to face, that you wouldn't want forwarded to someone else, or in extreme situations, appearing on the news. It is email etiquette to respond as promptly as you can, setting boundaries as you see fit. For example, if you choose to respond to email when you're not in the office. Also know that some conversations are better in person or over the phone, so pick up the phone if that option would save everyone some time. Also refrain from delivering bad news via email. Happy hour is what is commonly referenced as going to a bar with coworkers after work. Grabbing a drink or hanging out with coworkers in general is a great way to build your network of friends and is a common social practice. However, it is very important to exercise self-control in these situations. If you are drinking with coworkers, do not drink so heavily that you are going to behave inappropriately. Your behavior, even outside of work, is something that could affect you professionally. It is not okay to come to work the next day ill from drinking or smelling of alcohol. Regardless of whether you are drinking or not drinking, you still represent the company when you are hanging out with coworkers in a group setting. So your actions, positive or negative, represent the company. You should also avoid gossiping or complaining about work. If you prefer not to drink alcohol, offer to instead meet coworkers for coffee or a meal. You will most likely not be consuming alcohol at work, but there are a few occasions when this is an exception. There may be business lunches or dinners, conferences, or other networking and meetings where alcohol may be present. In these unique situations, a one drink maximum is usually the rule. You should never be drinking heavily or getting intoxicated at work. Communication is extremely important in a workplace, so this section will explain strategies to communicate most effectively. Different cultures have different communication styles, which can generally be grouped into indirect and direct. This can also be referred to as high context and low context cultures. High context cultures will be more indirect with their communication and use more nonverbal communication to get the message across. In a high context culture, relationships are more important than schedules and business. People who are indirect communicators often use words like possibly or maybe rather than no, and use a lot of metaphors in their communication. Generally, high context cultures are Southern Mediterranean, South American, Middle Eastern, and Asian. There are also direct communicators in the low context culture. People in low context environments are more straightforward, say what they mean, and give feedback very directly. They tend to over communicate with a lot of signs, directions, and documents. Generally, low context cultures are in the United States, Germany, Sweden, Norway, the Netherlands, Australia, and Canada. If you are from a direct communication culture and you want to communicate effectively to an indirect audience, it is important to remember that indirect communicators value relationships and may not always give you feedback as openly. Begin by establishing a relationship first. If you are from an indirect culture and you want to communicate more effectively in a direct environment, know that direct communicators value time and appreciate directness. It could help to make communication less vague. When learning to communicate in a new environment, it is important to determine context. For example, you can learn about personal space by observing how closely people stand to one another. Before sharing a personal story, observe to see if other people share information about their families and personal lives. You can observe what physical touch is appropriate by noticing if and how people may touch during conversation. Be attuned to the culture of your work environment to understand standards and expectations. It is also important to understand your office's preferred method of communication. Some offices may prefer meetings and face-to-face communication, while others prefer email, while in some modern workspaces, text messages and messaging apps could be considered appropriate. I suggest asking your supervisor their preferred method of communication for different situations. Regardless, when it comes to sharing information in the United States, it is generally better to over-communicate than under-communicate. Workplace etiquette. While observing an office space is helpful in determining expectations, this section will feature common etiquette, social norms, and practices present in most offices. Greeting. Greetings involve a minimal amount of physical contact. A firm, quick handshake with a smile and direct contact of the eyes is typical. It is not appropriate to kiss coworkers or strangers as a greeting. In the United States, it is important to maintain personal space. Americans typically do not like to be in close proximity to others, so it's best to keep an arm's length away when talking or standing near someone. Conversations begin with small talk that may seem personal, but this is not meant to be interpreted as an intrusion or invasion of your privacy. Typical topics may include a person's job, favorite things, hobbies, the weather, and etc. Using a title like Dr., Mr., or Mrs., followed by their last name, is considered appropriate and shows respect. Once acquainted, a person may give you permission to address them by their first name. General work expectations. Usually, the working week is Monday to Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., while longer hours could be common. Being on time is important, on time to work and on time to meetings as well. Know that in a business environment, some people are persistent and will likely not hesitate to disagree with you. So be prepared for seemingly confrontational conversations. Know that money, saving it or making it, is a key priority in many decisions. Innovation tends to prevail over tradition, and being on social media and other non-work related distractions while at work is often considered inappropriate. Dining. It's perfectly acceptable to refuse food or drink if you don't want it. The host will rarely consider it rude. However, speaking with food in your mouth, licking your fingers, eating off the plate of another, or slurping is considered rude. When you are eating at a restaurant, tipping your server is expected, usually 20% of the bill. Lunch is typically 1 hour, and when dining with others, one would usually pay for their own meal. Work relationships. Giving personal gifts or commenting on someone's appearance, even if it's a compliment, could be considered inappropriate. Americans tend to adopt metaphors in daily conversations, usually sports references like touch base, ballpark figures, or game plan. Generally, Americans like to laugh and enjoy talking with people with a good sense of humor. Appropriate jokes are usually welcome. Business cards are exchanged if you wish to contact that person later on. Adding them as a LinkedIn connection is also a good alternative. Avoid discussing religion or politics with those who you do not know well. Do not make ethnic, racial, or religious jokes. It is also best to avoid controversial topics. Americans are often uncomfortable with long periods of silence. And continuing to do something else, like being on your phone or on your computer, when in a meeting or speaking to someone, is often considered disrespectful. You can display respect and establish a good reputation with the company during the first few months on the job. Listed here are some common expectations of a new hire, like completing any onboarding tasks like training or paperwork. Get to know the organization, both physically and organizationally, meaning understanding the different roles and supervisory lines, as well as the geography of the space. Follow your manager's lead and determine communication best practices. Keep your manager informed of decisions and where you are in your training. Understand your workload and develop a strategy on how to manage it. Get to know the people of your office. Remember their names. And take initiative to get involved whenever possible. After a few months on the job, how do you know if you're doing well? This can be a common question in a workplace. As opposed to college, feedback is less formal and less consistent. Many companies grade their employees every 6 to 12 months via a performance evaluation. It is important to know who is writing your performance evaluation, when they do it, and most importantly, by what criteria. Outside of formal criteria, you could work out with your manager to set performance goals. A good workplace goal is SMART, or specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. Instead of a goal like make better sales, a SMART goal would be something like improve sale of new inventory by 20% by March of next year. It is also a good practice to seek out informal feedback by asking your supervisor semi-consistently for it. You could say something like, I would appreciate some feedback. From observing my work, how do you suggest I improve? Thank you for watching and learning more about common professional practices in the American culture. If you have further questions, make an appointment with your career consultant for information more tailored for you and your industry.